All right, in today's episode, we speak with Rob Lane, managing shareholder of Kerkering Barberio and Company. They're a regional accounting firm. Rob is a CPA by training and has sat on a number of nonprofit boards. He's certainly a pillar in our community. And we talk about the nuances of finance and a board member's responsibility and obligation. So I hope you enjoy this episode and learn a little bit more about nonprofit financials.
Hey everybody, Reed Corley here to let you know we will be releasing a new podcast every week. If you want to be the best board member you can be, visit our website, thecorleycompany.com, to sign up for our email list to be the first to know when a podcast drops.
Well, welcome to the I-501CU, the podcast for nonprofit board members. This is Michael Corley, and I'm excited to interview Rob Lane today. Rob Lane is managing shareholder for Kerkering Barberio and Company. And Rob, tell the audience hello and tell us a little bit something about yourself and your organization.
Well, thank you so much, Michael. It's great to be part of this podcast. Our firm is celebrating its 50th year here in Sarasota. And we've expanded to Lakewood Ranch and Tampa as well. And really, we've been reflective of this community and grown with the community. And throughout that, a big part of our industry focus has been not-for-profits. As we know, we're blessed with the philanthropic community we have here, and we have some very progressive nonprofits, and we have some very volunteer-oriented that really, don't have all the resources they might need. So it's been a pleasure to work with the nonprofits and appreciate what you all are doing to bring more resources to these important organizations.
Well, thank you, Rob. Now, you yourself, I know you have sat and are sitting on a number of nonprofit boards. Can you just share with the group the broad spectrum of nonprofits you've served on in your role?
Sure. Thank you. I personally believe in giving back to the community that you want to work in and live, but it's also been a cornerstone of our firm. I've been involved with economic development. I've been involved with the Chamber of Commerce. There was a wonderful organization for a number of years called SCOPE, Sarasota County Openly Plans for Excellence. I've been on some startups that were challenges. The Institute for the Ages was one that, quite honestly, we as a community tried to really be fairly progressive, and we're before our time, so that one didn't work. Currently on the Bay Park Conservancy and the United Way Board, great organizations.
Well, Kerkering Barberio certainly does allow you all to serve you and your fellow Kerkering Barberio folks are just entrenched in the community, and we thank you for that. And I think it's probably one of the reasons y'all have done so well. So for those listening, Kerkering Barberio and Company, go search it and you'll see Rob's face on the website. So Rob, you just gave a spectrum of organizations which you've sat on the boards of, and I know that's just a few of the ones that you have. What should a board member understand about the finances of the organization? What is the board member's role? Can you talk a little bit about that as you've seen and you've participated?
Yeah, certainly. I think board members are fiduciaries and stewards of not only the mission of the organization, but, the finances and the viability and the resources. I think it's incumbent upon maybe the board chair or the executive leadership to have a proper orientation of the organization. And I think in doing that, it's imperative that a board member understand how the organization is funded, what are the ongoing recurring resources that are available, and where are the challenges. And so, I think as you've talked about in prior podcasts, it's incumbent upon someone who wants to sit on the board to understand all of those resources and know what their role is. Certainly, there are some people that maybe won't be called upon to be as deeply knowledgeable, but there are others that it's going to be a critical part of what they give to the organization, their expertise in this area. So again, I think it starts with the courting. Should I be on this board? Do we want you on this board? To the orientation, to the rolling up of the sleeves, and really ensuring that the organization is successful.
You mentioned something, the fiduciary obligation responsibility of a board member, and I'm glad you did. And so that of course, lends itself to the finances of the organization as well. I've sat on a number of boards and people go, well, I really don't understand financials, so I'm going to defer. But I tell you, there is value in those people asking questions. Right? I mean, we shouldn't let board members be intimidated just because you're not versed in financial statements. But by asking questions, you really do learn quite a bit about the the organization itself, and give others the opportunity to think and opine.
Yeah, I think it's critical that you be inquisitive and question. And very often people that are on boards have other life experiences that are going to be a benefit to the organization. Because just because we don't do it this way now doesn't mean maybe we shouldn't consider it. So, I think not-for-profit financial statements honestly can be quite complex. And so if someone is used to running a construction company or running a manufacturing company, they may not look at the same financial statements they're used to. So understanding why certain things are done a certain way can allow that person, I think, to become more valuable to the organization. So again, as you're choosing what to put on the agenda, you have to give the appropriate amount of time to each important area, and one of them should be the financials. So,
in your experience, because you worked with a lot of nonprofits, both as a board member, we know, but also your firm audits them and works and consults with nonprofits. Are there 3, 4, 5, whatever it is, set of financial statements a nonprofit ought to produce on a regular basis? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. The most critical are your balance sheet and the statement of activities, which in a for-profit, that'd be your profit and loss. You want to make sure that you're analyzing this year's activities to a budget. And you might also analyze this year's activity versus last year. And what you're looking for are positive and negative trends that might jump out at you. Ensuring that you always know that cash is being reconciled and you know how much resources you have in the way of cash. As we were talking earlier, organizations of various sizes have different challenges. A startup has to just preserve and protect cash. It's not you don't have necessarily a recurring revenue stream yet that a more mature organization would have. I would say after that, it depends on the type of organization. We've seen some organizations that a significant part of the revenue model is their investments. And so ensuring that you're tracking investments versus benchmarks is a critical thing. Some organizations even have investment committees that are different than the finance committee. And then I think the other is key performance indicators, or KPIs. What makes this organization tick, and are we on plan as it relates to that? So as an example, it might be how many children served, or how many meals served, or if we're attempting to do counseling, how many people did we serve? And that not only helps with grant compliance, but it's our mission. It's the reason that we're here. Are we serving more people or less? And so it's something to think of. One last area that is so important for a nonprofit is to ensure there's controls around donors' gifts. And so, for an organization that receives an unrestricted gift, that's wonderful. But there are others that receive very restricted gifts, something for this program or this capital campaign or this location. And you want to always be able to demonstrate to your donors that we preserved your intentions, and I think that's important. So some organizations will look at a kind of a supporting schedule of what restricted dollars do we have, and those are the things that come to mind.
Well, that's very helpful. And on what regular basis should those financial statements be produced and shared with the board?
Certainly on a monthly basis. I believe that organizations that have some troubles very often aren't doing things on a consistent and monthly basis. So whether that gets shared in a detailed report that may not be necessary on a monthly basis, but certainly on a quarterly basis, there should be some discussion from the treasurer or the controller, CFO, and particularly if there's very, very good things happening or very bad things happening.
And this goes back to the fiduciary responsibility of the board, that you really need to be aware of what is going on from a financial perspective. Rob, you mentioned the investment committee, and I was going to ask you about the finance and the audit committee. So those are three financially related. You could say development might be, a fourth. But can you talk about when organizations should have those committees and how to use them?
Sure. Good question. We find that smaller organizations might have one committee and they do all of those things. As the organization grows, they're potentially looking to bring on maybe some current or retired CPAs that used to do auditing, and they understand what an audit truly is, and therefore they know what to ask of a fellow auditor. And another way of looking at it, the audit process should be completely independent in a best case scenario. And a finance committee should be collaborative, working with the organization. So some might view it as a little bit of a checks and balance, between the audit committee and the finance committee. That we only see that in our largest organizations that we audit, I would say.
Now, does every nonprofit have to have an audit?
Good question. The state of Florida put I believe it's called the Charitable Solicitation License Act, in place some years ago. And an organization that has less than $500,000 does not need to have an auditor review, but they certainly can. If they have between 500 and $1 million in contributions, they have to have a review or an audit. And if it's over $1 million, they have to have an audit.
So that's annual contributions, and it's an annual audit that they would need to have.
That's correct. And I think there's one other thing that we see organizations sometimes not prepared for. If they're getting federal dollars and that goes over a $750,000 threshold, they have to have what's called a single audit, which is a compliance audit around the specific requirements of that contract. And quite frankly, it's a big leap from the operations of an organization, maybe the way they were conducting business, and then what they need to do when they have that single audit. So be cautious when you celebrate getting that second grant that throws you over $750,000, because it comes with a lot of requirements.
Well, that's very interesting. So the difference between an audit and a review, and then what's the board's role in each?
Well, the difference is an audit requires independent third-party verification of the numbers that are material to the financial statements. A review is basically analytical procedures performed by the CPA and inquiries of management. So as an example, do you reconcile your bank accounts on a monthly basis? Yes. That's sufficient testing of that aspect of cash. If you're doing an audit, you're going to independently receive a confirmation of the balance, as well as the bank statement to look at. So you're going outside of the organization. And when you give an opinion or when you render your review report, you said, we have done inquiries and analytical review, and nothing came to our attention that said this is not in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So it's called negative assurance. It's more than a compilation, but it's far less than an audit.
And thank you for that. And I know people are going, oh my gosh, this is getting so detailed, but this is important because as a board member, you can't skirt this responsibility. And it's really important to understand the difference between review and audit, what the expectations are, what your role is in that, in the various committees. Because when you come out on the other side, you want to make sure that you're compliant. You've done everything the proper way. And I will tell you, there are a lot of people that don't understand the proper way, and it's just out of ignorance, a lack of understanding. It's not intentionality. And you probably see that all the time, I'd imagine, with clients.
Yeah, we do, and there's some people, quite honestly, that view the audit process as, something we need to do, and maybe we can get our friend to do one for free. And one, you need to be independent, but I think going back to the fiduciary responsibility, I think you need to ensure that the audit firm you work with knows and understands the aspects of your industry and your organization. Someone that only does tax returns and agrees to do one audit a year for the good of its favorite organization is probably not the right decision.
And just from my experience, and actually having worked with y'all, if you look at the audit as a learning opportunity, so if I have my nonprofit board member hat on, it's really enlightening, and the auditors can really help you improve the operations of the organization. Yes, they've certainly got a job to do, and that gives you great comfort that they're doing the audit, if you will. But through that process, you do learn opportunities to improve from an operational perspective.
I would agree, and I think one of the best things that you can do as a board member is if you have strategic initiatives that you're going to be working on the coming year. It might be going to the cloud. It could be around data security. It could be about opening a new location. Making sure the auditors are aware of all that and share the questions you'd like to ask with them when you're completed the audit, because we can do an audit and not be able to answer a very intelligent question at the very end. But had we known that that was important to the organization, we could be thinking about it. We could be looking into it as we plan and perform the audit. So I think it's critical that the board members be engaged enough that they share where the organization is going. And then I think also truly pushing for, are our systems adequate? Are we investing enough in the infrastructure of our organization? And how is the quality of our finance team? Do we have enough resources in this area? And, we see organizations that sometimes feel like they should be I hate to use the word, but they should be a charity and do everything on a shoestring. And then there are organizations that are going to pay their people well. They're going to have very good systems, and very often they're very successful. So just something to think of.
Should there be interaction throughout the year between the audit firm and the organization, or is it a one time a year relationship?
Good question. I would say it depends. I know in our organization, we attend the quarterly audit committee meetings of this one organization, and they cover other areas of compliance and risk management and things like that. So they want us engaged and involved throughout the year. And for many others, we have a planning meeting. Once we've put together the audit plan, we conduct the audit, and then we report in at the end. So I would say that's more common, the latter.
Yeah. And I think noteworthy here, and for board members listening, the audit is more than financials. And when Rob talked about risk management, much broader cybersecurity, those are all things that an audit firm looks at and can report back on. And it's enlightening when you get those reports back. So, Rob, let's dovetail a little bit into the tax returns and the taxing of nonprofits, that bear of a return called the 990 that is required. What is the board's role in understanding that 990 document?
It certainly is a challenge, isn't it? I think first and foremost, knowing that it's could be one of your most transparent documents that you're going to share via the internet, because there are organizations like GuideStar that put many 990s up there for anyone to review. So it's important that more than just the accountant and the CPA firm be involved in it. And the reason for that, on page 1, part 1, there's a discussion of the mission of the organization. So if that is evolved at all, I think it's important that that be updated consistently. There's a place on page 2 where you can really talk about your accomplishments that the organization has. And again, you want to make sure that certainly the executive director or CEO is scanning that to make sure it's telling the story you really want to share with people. And then I think it's just a conversation with your tax preparer or audit firm. Are there any of these check the box areas that are not desirable and things that we could work on? And it could be, do we review the executive director's compensation with an independent source or something like that? Certainly, there's a lot of compensation information in there, making sure that you know that that's accurate and complete. And there is what's called a Schedule O that is a blank sheet. And if there's any area of the return that you feel this really doesn't tell our story completely, or there's something we want to talk about, you have the ability to do that. And where I've seen that used sometimes, there's some deferred compensation that's required to be disclosed, and you have to disclose it on an annual basis. And then again, when the retirement or deferred comp is paid. So in the year of payment, it looks extremely large, and ensuring that that is communicated, not that everyone's going to get the Schedule O, but I think that's an important thing as well.
So unlike our personal tax returns, which are supposed to be confidential, those of a nonprofit are available for those that want to search for it and find it, like Rob said. So use it as a strategic communications tool. Yes, the numbers are the numbers, but like he said, make sure you're telling your story. Use it as an opportunity to share, because there are people like consultants like me who do pull that information just to understand the size of the organization. But there are a number of people who do that as well. So that is public information, and you can use it to your advantage.
And I would tell you also, Michael, that many of our clients with us or on their own will look throughout the United States at similar organizations so that they can benchmark themselves and look for comparisons. We know that there is some level of competition locally, maybe for donors, but if you think about a performing arts organization in Sarasota, one in Boston, one in Austin, Texas, it can give you some nice comparable data.
Yeah, very good point. Rob, let me ask you this. You worked, again, number of nonprofits, your organization does. Are there best practice opportunities that you all regularly see that if I'm a board member, I need to be aware of?
Certainly, I think around the budgeting process, some organizations really excel at their budgeting process. It's not a mystical financial project. It's something that really shares the mission, goals, and intentions of the organization, not only with the board and through the board, but to the program managers themselves. Many people gravitate to a not-for-profit, not because they love the financial aspects of something. So, but you empower them when they truly know what resources they have available. You let them be part of the execution of not only the budget, but your plan for the year. So I would say watching the budget process is certainly been one of them. The other thing we're seeing more and more is organizations looking at their investing, and we're not investment experts by any stretch, but many of them are attempting to have a more passive investment strategy where they're using very, very low cost funds, and they're reducing their recurring annual costs. I saw one recently that went from 57 basis points down to almost 5. And so when you think of that recurring fee, that's pretty significant.
And is that something that would come through the investment committee? typically?
It would,
'Cause
yeah.
a larger size organization. Yeah, and that leads into a question that I had regarding reserves. When you all counsel nonprofits, is there a certain amount of reserves you encourage those to have?
That's a great question, one that's often asked, and I would have said, back in 5 years ago, you'd kind of get a glazed over look when you'd say, you need to have this type of reserve around. And then we had the pandemic, and everybody had to go home. And all of a sudden, some organizations, you think of a performing arts organization, they just stopped. And so many were in fine shape because they have a large amount of reserves. We would say normally that 6 months is a ideal. 3 to 6 months is I believe what the federal funding agencies want to see if they're going to fund you. I would add, when you look at what we just all went through with Hurricane Ian, you just never know how your business is going to be disrupted. So having that is significant.
And when we're talking reserves, we're talking operating reserves to keep the lights on, to keep paying people for X period of time. If you have a certain amount of money above those reserves, is that when you would start considering some type of investment and maybe even an endowment?
Yes, and an endowment from a donor is permanently restricted, but many boards create, a board designated endowment. And just not to go too deep into that, that is basically showing the intention of the board. But if we had a crisis, they could change that. You can't change a donor restricted endowment or permanently restricted.
Okay. And is there a certain amount of money you should have before you start considering an endowment?
I would say certainly $2 million and up. Some of the larger financial houses, they have their own minimums, and some of them might be 5 to 10 million. But certainly, you can find financial advisors to assist you with 2 million and up.
Okay, very good. So for those of you listening, you're currently with a small organization. It does happen. Dreams do come true. You can raise enough money down the road as you get to a substantial size to have an endowment. That is not unusual. And it does change the way you approach your practices, policies, and procedures. But that's a good thing.
Yes.
Rob, kind of a bonus question. You brought this up a few minutes ago, and it's something I've been intrigued by, and that's deferred comp in the nonprofit space and as a tool to retain, to engage. Can you just talk at a broad level about how deferred comp works in nonprofit and how it might be used?
Sure. I think progressive organizations, as they grow, they want to attract the best talent that they can. And, people that could be working in the for-profit sector might be attracted to the not-for-profit sector. But in order to, one needs to be competitive. And so what some organizations are doing, there are what are called 457 plans. And these plans basically allow you to set aside compensation that is going to be vested over a period of time. So if the CEO stays for 5 years, there could be an incremental $20, $30, $50,000 a year that person could earn, and it's a bit of pay for performance, and we're beginning to see more and more of those.
I appreciate you saying that because I don't think it's something that most people are aware of. And for board members, you've got a good CEO, you want to retain him or her. Compensation, we all think, well, it's just straight W-2 compensation, but there are opportunities similar to in the for-profit sector. Obviously, there's no such thing as equity, but the deferred comp can play a role, and encourage you to research that and think through that and discuss it with your fellow board members.
Great point. Yes.
So, Rob, as we think and we come to wrapping up this interview, And you think about the role of the board, financials in particular, is there anything else you'd like to share? Any guidance you'd like to give to board members?
Well, I think one of the things as I reflect on some of the boards I've been on and as I've watched organizations, to be careful that just because we have a break-even profit and loss statement doesn't necessarily mean that we're succeeding. And what I mean by that is if revenue has fallen short and the executive director or CEO has not hired the two people that the organization really needs, the P&L could be balanced, but we're not achieving our strategic mission. So truly understanding that we need to roll up our sleeves from a fundraising perspective or an introduction standpoint, and make sure we get the top line budget as well as the bottom line budget. I certainly think that's something that is very critical. A couple of other things I guess I would say is knowing how best to but engage your board members. And to me, some of the retired C-level executives that I've worked with in this community, some are so outstanding as board members because they know how to navigate and not necessarily say, well, you need to do it the way we did it at this large publicly traded company, but they know how to do things like strategic planning, and they know how to do things like maybe personnel reviews in a way and goal setting. So, finding a way to let these great board members understand your organization in such a way that they can share what they've done to be successful with your organization. I've been on boards or I've watched boards that have people that are just so talented and they've elevated the organization. So I certainly think that's very, 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 very important.
I think and you touch on the leadership role of the board members, and you're absolutely right. We recently released a podcast that I share my thoughts. I think it's the best leadership development experience there is. And so whether you're that retired executive and you're able to deploy all the acumen you've learned, or you're the younger person starting in the career, there's just an opportunity to serve. And a wise CEO will engage those board members and allow them to help support the organization. Rob Lane, I appreciate your time today. This is such an important topic. And it just, every time I do a board retreat, when I facilitate those and I hear somebody say, well, I don't really understand financials, and kind of dismiss it, I go, oh my gosh, no. You may not understand them, but you certainly got an obligation to be inquisitive and ask those questions. And I guarantee if you're thinking that question, somebody else is thinking that question as well. So, Rob, I really appreciate it. Any parting comments before we conclude?
Well, Michael, thank you again for inviting me to do this. And thank you for what you're doing for the not-for-profit community. I think as we can help organizations become stronger, it just helps the community. So again, thank you for all you're doing.
Rob Lane, ladies and gentlemen, the managing shareholder for Kerkering Barberio and Company. He can be found on the web, and please reach out to him. He's a wealth of knowledge. And we appreciate it, Rob, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, Michael. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, that was a great interview with Rob Lane. And now our segment called Recapping with Reed. And what does a young person take out of our conversation? So, Reed, Rob Lane, managing director for Kerkering Barberio. He sat on a number of nonprofit boards, a lot of wisdom, and from a financial perspective, among other things. So what are your takeaways?
So my first takeaway from our talk with Rob Lane is to know how to best engage your board members. Each one has a unique skill and expertise. So set yourself up for success by having them help you with what they are best at.
Very good. You're exactly right. Everybody's a little bit different. What's your second point?
My second point is that the 990 is one of the most transparent documents that you will share with the public. And it's important to have more than just the accountant and the CPA firm be involved in the creation of the 990. I know you and I have both looked at a bunch of 990s before, and it is true that it is extremely transparent. You can get almost any pertinent information about an organization that you want to from the 990. So be sure that more than just the accountant and CPA firm are involved in the creation of that document, so it reflects your organization accurately and more than just the finance aspect.
Absolutely, you're right. It's wise to understand that and know that. And what's your third point?
My third and final point is to ensure you have controls around restricted gifts. You want to be able to show your donors that you can preserve their intentions. Nobody wants to donate money to an organization who does something differently with the money that you donated than what it was intended for.
Right. Big discussion always on donor intent and maintaining and honoring that intention that the donor had when he or she gave you the money. It's very, very important. If you're not careful, those funds can be perceived as fungible, and you don't want that to happen. And that's the board's responsibility, ensure the organization is compliant. So there you go, 3 bullet points from Reed in our segment, Recapping with Reed.